Today we celebrate the conception of St. John the Baptist. And we just heard the whole story in the gospel reading. But I think one of the things that we need to look at is we need to compare the gospel reading for the day, which is Christ is in the boat with the disciples, and he tells them to let down, and they'd been fishing all night and they hadn't gotten anything. And Jesus has them put down the net, and there's so many fish that they don't know what to do. And Peter bows down at Jesus' feet, realizing that this was not just some wandering rabbi. Seeing him with his spiritual eyes, he realized who he was. And he said, "Lord, depart from me, for I am a sinful man." And it's precisely this which is the experience of what it means to encounter God, especially for the first time. But any kind of deep, authentic encounter with God leads us to not only to realize our own sins and our own unworthiness, but it wants to make us flee from the presence of God, because we feel so completely defiled, unclean, sinful, and broken, and yet God reaches out to us, embraces us, shows us his love. Like he did to Peter and the other disciples. He said, from now on, instead of catching fish, you will catch men. You'll be fishers of men. And so God revealed them to themselves. He showed them what their true vocation is. So it is also when we encounter God that he reaches out, embraces us, reveals us to ourselves, which is usually not very pretty, and loves us in spite of it, in spite of all of the sins and the brokenness and all that is within us, and reveals to us what our true vocation is in life. Now we have quite a contrast here with Zechariah, who was a priest, he was a Levite, and they had divisions among the Levites, and so they allocated various tasks in the service of the temple, and the priests would come in like for a week out of each year, and each one would fulfill whatever was required of him. In this case, it came to Zechariah to burn incense in the temple. And burning incense was a key element of the priesthood among the Jews, because, and even the ordination of the priest was that his hands were filled with incense, which he would then offer on the altar, which was a charcoal brazier. And so Gabriel appeared to him at this time and gave him this joyous proclamation that his wife would conceive and bear a son. It didn't matter that they were elderly and past the age of childbearing. That she would conceive and bear a son, and his name would be John, and that he would be great, and he would go before the Christ. Zechariah and Elizabeth had been chosen by God. They had been chosen to bear the forerunner of Christ because of their holiness, their piety. And yet, Zechariah receives this rather intense rebuke from Gabriel because Zechariah didn't believe him. He said, well, how can this happen? I can't father a child. My wife can't bear children. It didn't make any sense. He was not thinking spiritually. He was not thinking according to the according to the knowledge that God can and just might do anything. But he was stuck in his rational mind, and basically saying, God can't do that. And so he was struck dumb, mute, until John was born, and he even gave the angel even gave Zechariah the name of his son, John. God's economy of salvation is something that was set from the beginning of the world. That he would choose these people. He chose Zechariah and Elizabeth. He chose Joachim and Anna to bring forth the mother of God, also elderly, also beyond the age of childbearing, and yet God blessed them in that. He chose Mary from all generations, one who'd keep her soul in the most profound virginal purity. And while there is an order to nature, by God's will it can be overcome. Indeed, when Christ himself took flesh of the Virgin, the order of nature was overcome because he had no human father. But the real contrast lies between Peter and Zechariah, between Mary and Zechariah. When the archangel appeared to Mary, she said simply, "How can this be? But be it unto me according to your word." In profound humility. With Zechariah, he was stuck in his head, and so was struck dumb. Until the birth of that child, when he was loosed, that he also might call his name John. God comes to us in various ways. God speaks to us in various ways. We may not be chosen, we won't be chosen to bear the Messiah, because that's already happened. But who knows what God may choose you for? And when we enter into deeply into prayer, so that, as it says in the epistle, that God has shown forth his light into our hearts, that we may have the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. I love that passage, by the way. So that we may have the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. So that, looking not simply with our earthly eyes, but with our spiritual and noetic perception, we might behold that radiant light as God comes to us and reveals a little bit of himself to us. So that in that and through that, we might not only come to understand ourselves and realize who God made us to be, but that we might truly know God through that vision of the light of the glory of God, which we see in the face of Christ. Amen.